We deny everything and discredit every witness. That is the priority.
And the Roswell incident. Is the site secure?
It is classified, General. The public must never know.
Remember, this organization running these covert programs is the world's most dangerous and largest criminal enterprise. Admiral Hillenkoetter stated that the secrecy around UFOs is a threat to the national security, not the UFOs, the secrecy around it. They said, look at your phone. And on his phone, they had put horrible things on it and said to him, you either keep your mouth shut or you're going to go to prison and never see your children again. Ultimately, this needs to be a global disclosure movement. It isn't just the United States.
Look at what just happened to our former president, what they're doing in regards to what's going on in the world. Are these people afraid?
Well, of course they are. I mean, as soon as I got off the phone with the most senior person in the U.S. government covertly dealing with this, I had a Black Hawk helicopter hovering over my house, rattling my entire house. Yes, of course it's dangerous, and of course it's risky. But, you know, I tell these guys remember, these folks are not politicians. These senior intelligence and military investigators who are assigned to the government now as civilians, they're not, even though they may have been JSOC and special forces and this and that, these are not people who are lighting the loafer political, you know, no offense to lawyers and, you know, bankers and businessmen. These are people who are hardened on the battlefield and hardened in terms of special operations. And so they understand this, but they have never seen something like this. I mean, one of the very senior folks that I'm dealing with called the group that they've encountered. And by the way, when you mischaracterize this process, when they were investigating this issue, even when they went to the Lockheed Skunk Works, they were basically shown, quote, a bunch of antique aircraft with jets. They weren't given any of the information of what's actually been worked on out there in the desert. So I think that because that happened, they knew they were being gaslit and deceived. And because of that, they reached out to us. After that, we gave them enough actionable intelligence. And let me explain what that means. Here is the deep underground base where this operation is located. Here's the gate. Here's what's in that facility. And here's all the details that we have from our hundreds of sources. That's all been given to them. Based on that, they didn't knock on the door and get in anywhere. They kicked the doors in. So this has been going on now for 14 months. And so they have actually gotten an enormous amount of information, but they've encountered a kind of thuggery that you would think is in a bad conspiracy movie. But it happens to be true because remember, this organization running these covert programs is the world's most dangerous and largest criminal enterprise. Full stop, end of discussion. So forget the mafia, forget the worst terrorist cells you've ever heard of, forget all of that. This organization is way worse and more lethal and vicious. So unfortunately, they have hit that buzzsaw, but they have persisted and there's a certain amount of cover that we've extended. The organization that's been watching what we're doing, who's supportive, remember, there are factions of this covert group. And there's a substantial faction that thinks it's ridiculous this issue is still secret. I met with a man years ago who worked this matter for a private corporation, Northrop Grumman, and he was astonished that it wasn't out by the late 1960s. I mean, we're talking, 50 some years ago. So I think this is, there are people who are extremely committed to the truth coming out and to the fact that the covert group currently running these projects is an existential threat to national security and to world peace and future security of the planet. And I always point out, don't take my word for that statement. Look at the very first, or second, but technically really the first CI director, Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter. And he stated in a letter to the New York Times after Dwight Eisenhower gave his famous Beware the Military Industrial Complex speech. And Admiral Hillenkoetter stated that the secrecy around UFOs is a threat to the national security, not the UFOs, the secrecy around it. So now that was 62 years ago. Now imagine the kind of threat matrix that's presented after beyond what he knew in the early 1960s. What has evolved since then, technologically, operationally, et cetera, and so on. So it is a very delicate issue. And this is one of the reasons why I think the next phase and level of laws passed by the Congress needs to be an amnesty period for a lot of the more senior people in that organization to come forward. Because what you don't want to get into is into a open conflict. Violent conflict. Because as Admiral Wilson, who I briefed back in the 90s, said, once he had it confirmed to him that what the best aircraft and weapon he knew we had were what everyone knows about in the B-2 stealth bomber, et cetera, and that this secret organization had things that could, quote, as he said to me, do circles around my B-2 stealth. So, and now this is the head of the intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, an admiral, sitting in his office. And I looked at him and I said, yes, that is the case. But the problem is we have the rule of law and the truth. And if we can disclose this properly, the public on our side. And they have their covert group and a lot of money, but they do have very powerful technologies. And I think this is why it has to be done wisely. I found in my archive a few weeks ago, my original set of recommendations to Bill Clinton to create an amnesty period for senior people in this organization to come forward so that this issue could get resolved without, as one guy recently asked me, a bloodbath. And I think that's really what we're trying to move towards, is a peaceful resolution to the subject where we don't go trying to get a pound of flesh from people. The other problem is restitution of funds. There's a senior executive with a major contractor for the U.S. government who's now early 80s, who wants to come forward. He has several $100 million that he got by working with that a corporation, and he's afraid that it could be seized under the RICO, Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization laws of the U.S. government. And he doesn't want his heirs, his children and grandchildren, to be left penniless. So there are a lot of complex issues here, and people go, gee, so these are the kind of conversations I'm having with the one side, people who want to be cooperating witnesses, and then you have this other end of it, where the United States government is just now getting up to speed on this at all, and therefore don't have a mechanism and the laws in place to make this transition to disclosure, complete disclosure, an official disclosure happen peacefully. So that is another thing we're working on.
You're also working with Michael Schratt, military aerospace historian. He's been collecting the files, and both of you will be presenting over there at the National Press Club on June 12th over there in DC. Massive amounts of information. Again, working with Michael Schratt, he's been doing this for decades. You've teamed up with Michael to present some evidence over there in DC at the National Press Club, something historic, which was one of the biggest internet phenomenons when he did it in the early 2000s. And hundreds of millions of people saw this. What are we going to expect to see in DC when you're presenting this evidence? You got terabytes of information. What's the end game here?
Well, obviously, when you have 2 hours and you have, if it was continuously presented, the information we have, the testimony we have, the documents we have would last probably 3 to 4 years. I'm not exaggerating. So the big challenge we're having is what is the very tip of the iceberg that we need to present to give a sense of the scope of the evidence and for example, out of the 800 or so top secret military witnesses and folks that we've identified, and many of whom I've interviewed. Some of them have already been recorded. Some are now, this month, being brought to DC. to give their information through this classified process. How do you present that in 2 hours? You know, what do you present? You have to understand you're not talking to, the mashed potato UFO circuit where people are, conference people who go to UFO things day in and day out, year in and year out, and know the subject. You're talking to the general public. You're talking to the people in the U.S. government, 99.9% of whom have no information on this. So you have to build your case from zero and then take them all the way through to the conclusions, but also, and the assessment, the intelligence assessment, but then the recommendations. What do we do now? So all of that has to be presented and done concisely in less than 2 hours. So that's why the conference beforehand, it's open to the public until it's sold out. In other countries, they should do the same thing with their country's leadership, members of parliament, whatever it is, because ultimately this needs to be a global disclosure movement. It isn't just United States. And there are these other countries, many of whom I've met with some of their leaders. I've met with 4 of the Five Eyes. The Five Eyes are the intelligence cooperating countries of, United Kingdom, Canada, United States, Australia, New Zealand. I've met with ministers of defense for all those countries except New Zealand. And what I found is that in every single case, they were never read in or briefed on the subject. Now, this is an important category of witnesses. I call them inverse witnesses. What do I mean by that? It's how you prove that these projects are being run in a criminal manner. Because if a president or a minister of defense or a senior member of the Senate Intelligence Committee or the head of intelligence joint staff like Admiral Wilson or the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, whom I've briefed, and other people like that all over the world have not made any inroads into getting into what's going on in their countries or in the United States, that is prima facie proof that the subject is being run illegally. Because they can, one of the things I just determined in 97, 98, once we found out that the Clinton administration, and a friend of his just recently confirmed this to me, was never read into this where they had any control over the matter. And that so if you go from the president on down, and even through the military chain of command, where there are people who, if the projects were being run legally, the people managing the black budget in the Congress, the people in the Pentagon, read into unacknowledged projects like Admiral Wilson, they would know about this. And if they inquired about it, they wouldn't be threatened. They would be read in. But that's not how this is run. And that is proof that the organization is in fact a criminal operation, unconstitutional and illegal. We have to establish these elements because now that the Pentagon has said, yes, the UAPs are real. Yes, they're material objects. Yes, our sensors pick up that it's an actual 3D thing moving in ways we don't understand, blah, blah. Then the next question is, what are they? Now, what they're being told by professional counterintelligence operatives such as Luis Elizondo and Chris Mellon and Nick Pope and others is that we don't know what they are, but they're a threat to the national security. That false narrative, which we exposed 2 years ago in our documentary, The Cosmic Hoax, which you can see on the YouTube channel for free, that is the narrative that they created as another way of deceiving the press, the American people, and the members of Congress. But see, that little game ended about 14 months ago. So now there are people in the Congress, some are beginning to speak out publicly, and kudos to them, like Congressman Burchett. I just got a letter with 16 senior members of the U.S. Senate signing a letter to the Pentagon to step up their investigation on this issue. Unfortunately, they're recommending it through the Aero office, which in my opinion may or may not be an actual clean or trustworthy mechanism. But at least the members of Congress, the Senate and House, are stepping up and are stepping forward very decisively.
Hey, they're asking questions. And again, Tim Burchett speaks of a major cover-up. He he agrees with you that there is some kind of secret being hidden from us, and it's on a high level of
Right.
secrecy, and he's demanding the truth. And he says there's this blackmail politics going on with people that have answers, but they're not going to come forward because they usually got something on them. This is how he says Washington works.
Yeah, of course.
Do we exactly? Do we need more Tim Burchetts out there? How many other congressmen are being as dare I say ballsy as Congressman Tim Burchett coming forward and asking questions, or all these other? Go ahead.
Well, there have been he's been very outspoken, but Senator Rubio's made some very strong comments. There are other members of Congress and Senate who have a bit milder, perhaps, in their approach. But I think don't mistake what's said publicly with what they feel is going on. But the point you make about using blackmail files, this is as old as the hills, where you try to get dirt on someone and use it against them. And of course, famously, J. Edgar Hoover had a file on everybody, every president, every congressman, everybody. And that's how he stayed in power, was that no one dared challenge him because he could ruin them with all the dirty tricks and stuff they had on people. So yes, that is something that happens day in and day out and day in and day out. And so what I always tell people is that, so what? You just have to ignore that noise. But if you're a politician and you have to get reelected, you can't ignore it. And so this does become a problem. But there too, one of the things we're going to call for, and I have not talked about this before, is that there be an immediate investigation, criminal investigation, subsequent to these open hearings that are being now talked about actually occurring, by the Department of Justice to prosecute those who have been involved in felonious activity, drug running, money laundering, threats and intimidation, assassinations, so-called wet works, the use of force to kill people who know too much. All of that needs to be moved quickly into an investigation, because I have dealt just recently with two very key top secret witnesses who have been had this sort of a dirty bag of tricks played on them. Remember, at this time also with AI and what they call deep fakes, both audio and video deep fakes, they can create anything. A man that I know not long ago, in the last 9 months, had a couple of men approach him and they said, "Look at your phone." And on his phone, they had put horrible things on it and said to him, "You either keep your mouth shut or you're going to go to prison and never see your children again for as long as you live," quote unquote. This is the kind of stuff I deal with day in and day out. Now, I think something like that should be immediately handed over to people with the investigatory power and prosecutorial power, that whoever did that should be arrested and tried for treason, number one, and then number two, felonious threats and intimidation and what have you. But see, this is the sort of thing that has happened for years. There are people who have documented over the last 70 years many occasions of this happening to either public officials, UFO researchers, or whatever. Now, with the kind of technology that exists, they could show you, having an affair with Kim Kardashian or whoever, and make it look like it was 100% real. And this is the problem. They have the technologies and the means and the intent to do this. So how do you get that under control? Again, you have to begin to stay not only within the law, but use the power of the law to protect the brave and good people who want to come forward, whether it's a member of Congress wanting to support this process, or a top secret whistleblower, or whoever it is. And I think that is a really important element that's been missing. We've all been doing this in the wilderness without any official protection, which is in and of itself an outrageous situation. So that has to also, I think, be put into place sooner rather than later.
Speaking of the AI and the advancement of it, it's been unloaded to the public. People are using it. Kids are using it. ChatGPT passing their courses. But a whole new level is the AI as far as generating people and situation. How far advanced is this going to get? Is this going to be a tool for the false flag alien invasion when they set this AI in motion with these graphics that seem photorealistic, that we won't be able to tell whether it's real or not? This is getting to a stage.
No, it already is. It already is. But see, here's your question. Forget one key point. Whatever you know about through a Google search, or that's on CNN or in The Economist or some magazine, is at least 5 to 20 generations behind what these covert programs have. So if you think the state of the art of this capability is what you're hearing and reading about, you need to take a wake-up pill, because that is not how technology happens. These classified projects have technologies way in advance of anything that is known and discussed in the tech sector or in the public media. And this is a dangerous situation. This is why the man who in 1997, and we're trying to track him down again, who was sequestered out of the briefings we were doing for members of Congress at that time in Washington, he had been on an interagency committee in 1974 where they could hit a button and simulate an alien invasion on the planet seamlessly. And he said everyone from the president on down would be deceived by it. So that system has been fully operational. He said it was fully operational well before his tenure there. Now, I have heard this from enough people to know that that capability that card, the sort of the fake alien invasion card, can be played at any time. Now, what most people don't understand is that card began to be played in 1953 and 1954. What do I mean? Once we mastered gravity control in 1954, and they knew they were about there in 53, we have a document from the CIA director talking about the psychological warfare value of the UFO subject. The same language was used in the document that Jacques Vallée has but won't release. That is a CIA document from 1985 that explicitly talks about the CIA committing atrocities in Latin America and Brazil and Argentina, staging alien abductions for their, quote, psychological warfare value, et cetera, and so on. Now, we have multiple data points on this. Now, one of the things the public has to understand is that everyone's belief about this issue, aliens, UFOs, the whole zeitgeist, it's 90% staged deception. Now, are there actually extraterrestrial civilizations? Yes. Have they been engaging in those sort of activities? No. We know for a fact these abductions and mutilations are done by this clandestine organization. And there is growing body of evidence for that. But the problem is that when people talk about when will this false flag happen, I said, look in your rearview mirror 70 years. That's when it started. It started 70 years ago. Now we're living in, that's all the psychological preparatory phase. The question is, will they play that final card? And if they do, what are our defenses? I think our only way we can prevent that card from being played is to expose the entire program, expose what they've been doing, how they've been doing it, what part of this is true, what part is false. I don't think it's a coincidence that about the time we were working together on your film, and I had gotten the senior members of the government read into these projects, and they started getting kicking in doors, that the Pentagon received from Dr. Kit Green et al. And released 1,500 pages of accounts of people being, quote, injured by UAPs. Unwanted pregnancies, neurological damage, burns. Now, every single one of those cases were done by humans against humans, made to look like it was a, quote, UFO. Well, it was a UFO in the sense that the victim it was unidentified, but they staged it to look alien. So they've already started playing that card, but no one's watching this. No one's paying attention to what's going on. So when that got released, I went, yep, here we go. Then after I brought the first senior military witness who had been an early U-2 spy plane pilot with multiple encounters with these ET craft, as well as working with the Lockheed Skunk Works and others, and Ben Rich personally, into this process in DC, you had all of February light up with these Chinese balloons and UAPs we shot down. So, this is no coincidence, my friend. But at the same time, we expect this. This is not surprising to us at all. It would be surprising if they didn't do it. So we are factoring all this in our algorithm and planning. But the public needs to be aware that the more this process of the subject coming out happens, the more there's going to be a counter push to pull it into, we're being invaded, they're a threat to the national security, we need an extra $10 trillion from the world economy to fight the big bad aliens invading us. I mean, that's what the game has always been. This is what Werner von Braun said on his deathbed to Carol Rosin. We know this. So the issue is, how do we avert it? Well, I think the disclosure of the truth and proving what we're discussing here and having a full investigation. You can't do that in a 2-hour press conference. Having a full investigation, an open hearing, and then the Department of Justice with someone who's a clean investigator, if you can find one in Washington, really drill down on this. But they'd have to be beyond reproach. They couldn't be someone who could be blackmailed or bought off. I mean, let's not forget, a senior member of the private contracting world on UFOs in '93 told me, quote, "We have given at least 10,000 people $10 million a piece or more to secure their cooperation with our project." And, I had 2 or 3 attempts to purchase me back in those days, and they found out I wasn't for sale. So now the only way they can deal with me is to defame me and call me names, and it's fine. I mean, 30 years of being called every nasty name in the book, I couldn't care less. But you get a pretty thick skin. But the point I'm making, however, is that most people just now stepping onto the field, who, if you're in the U.S. government and you're either threatened or there's this nasty Oppo research they have on you or that they create, or they offer you a lot of money or a powerful position, unfortunately, most humans are going to be affected by that kind of approach. And this is why, to really get to this, I always tell people, the bottom line on this is what's in your heart? What are your intentions? Do you have the courage to go forward? And are you incorruptible? You have to be absolutely incorruptible.